I'm Greg Tepper. That's Greg Powers, and this is This Week
in Recruiting.
You said recruiting.
Recruiting?
It's fine.
You gave me 2 weeks off. I forgot how to say it.
That's fine. It's Greg Powers of Next Level Athlete. Follow him on Twitter at gpower79 and follow Next Level Athlete at Next Level D1, our recruiting guru. Back after a couple of weeks. How you been, bud?
Great, man. Thanksgiving was awesome. How about yours?
Oh, why do you ask questions you know the answer to? It was wonderful. Of course.
Was there any Thanksgiving talk on Texas football today while I was gone?
Oh, no, definitely not.
Definitely not. Yeah. Definitely not. All right. So let's start. We're getting into This Week in Recruiting. We're now deep into the playoffs, into the third round of the playoffs. Let's start with your Recruit of the Week. And I feel like this could be a guy we make Recruit of the Week every week.
Second time.
Quarterback Rashawn Johnson from Port Neches Groves. And this is going to it is with deep regret that I inform you that Rashawn Johnson is at it again. Boy, howdy, he put on a show last week.
Well, and I think the one thing that's most impressive is what he's able to do on the ground. And we've talked about him in the past, but I think it's a good comparison to possibly compare him to Sam Ehlinger, who's on the UT roster now. Of course, Johnson is a UT commit. But as a more dangerous runner. He's very accurate with the football like Sam is. He's a great leader like Sam is. But dare I say, he's going to torch defenses a bit more with his legs.
You know, I've heard some people talk about Rashawn Johnson as the moment he steps on campus, he's the best quarterback on campus. Do you buy into that?
You know, he's the #1 rated quarterback in our college ranking system at Next Level Athlete for a reason. It's a great year for quarterbacks, too, because you have Grant Gunnell, who's going to Arizona. He may have the most potential NFL upside, but I think when you're talking about strictly evaluating guys for the college level, he's the best one in the state. So does that translate to being able to compete right away with an upperclassman? I think that he at least makes the quarterback room better and pushes those guys on campus. What does it say for Shane Buechele? I think also who I would probably go out on a limb and say that Shane Buechele is probably a highly likely transfer candidate this offseason already.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And by the way, if you're into quarterback prospects, may I interest you in Port Neches Groves versus Fort Bend Marshall?
Oh, boy.
No doubt.
Malik Hornsby versus Rashawn Johnson. That could be a fireworks factory. So it could be a lot of fun. So let's go to our commit of the week. Love the small schools.
Definitely.
And love Badger. The Merkel Badgers have a stud we've been talking about for a long time from the high school ranks. He finally makes his commitment. Jonah White from Merkel makes his call this week.
And he let his highlight tape go public now, or Merkel coaches let his highlight tape go public now. This dude balled.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a great player last year, but his senior season, he went off.
Yeah.
And it's a very fun highlight tape to watch. It's probably going to be rolling somewhat over as we're talking about his talent, so you'll get to see a portion of it. He's an electric player. But what position fits him best, I think, is the question going forward, because we see him mostly as a running back on the high school level, but I think he could be a tremendous wide receiver at Baylor, where he's made his commitment. He's the 16th commitment in the class for the Baylor Bears, and he's the 14th in-state commitment for Baylor. So I think it's also an interesting way to look at recruiting this year, because Art Briles was so heavy in the state of Texas. Matt Rule's not really dropped off that one bit.
This strikes me as a guy who flew a little bit under the radar his entire recruitment.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, basically, Baylor is his second Power 5 offer. The other one's Kansas.
Right.
And so, but he's got offers from, Texas State, Army, UTEP, things like that. This seems like a guy who didn't necessarily get the acclaim that he's probably due, because this guy was a baller for Merkel.
There's some big offensive linemen who are still left available in the state of Texas that are under the radar. Guys down in the Houston area, Isaiah Hookfin, Rodakeish Cheney, big bodies who I think are guys that P5 school should be after. But on my own Greg Powers personal list, Jonah White, before he made his commitment to Baylor, was my highest riser off the senior tape. I think that he could probably play for anybody in the country. He has that type of skill set, so Baylor was smart and savvy to get in with that offer and put pressure on him to commit.
It's Greg Powers of Next Level Athlete talking This Week in Recruiting here on Texas Football Today. Get involved in the conversation, hashtag TF Today. Let's move on to our underclassman of the week, and this is a guy who we've known about for a little bit, and then he exploded this past week with a huge game in their team's win over Lufkin. Marvin Mims, the junior receiver from Frisco Lone Star. I mean, this guy's tape jumps off the screen at you.
Well, I mean, when 34.1 yards per catch versus
Yeah.
Lufkin's defense, I mean, come on. That's just ridiculous. And I think probably the Lone Star win is my upset of the Texas high school football playoffs so far.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they're a great team, but no one was picking Lone Star to beat Lufkin.
I think you're
As a matter
right.
of fact, Lufkin was getting a lot of picks to win the championship.
Yeah, I would put that on the level of Horn over Cedar Hill and or Horn over Temple and then Pierce over Cedar Hill. I think that it's on that level of big time. Spearman over Cisco, those big time upsets.
Right.
I think you're right. And a big reason they upset them is because Marvin Mims went off.
And Horn's upset, too, is a product of their record this year, of
Sure.
course. I mean, I watched them play against Longview. They were very much in that game, had the talent to match up with Longview. So I think that Horn does have dogs. Their record just didn't reflect the talent that they have on their roster, although Temple's a great team. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that is a bit shocking. But Mims was able to help control that game. Their defense played well. And, of course, he's got a lot of the heavy hitters. When you look at his list and you see offers from schools like Ohio State, Texas A&M, TCU, Nebraska.
People are starting to take
grabs your eye.
notice. People are taking notice, and this is a guy who I think you're gonna be hearing about a lot next year. Our 24/7 has him as a 4-star recruit, and a guy who's I think a star in the making, and another year for him. And finally, let's talk about your prospect on the rise. Another receiver. We're going to stay on the offensive side. Going to stay out wide. Going to talk about Calvin Wiggins Jr., a kid from Byron Nelson. I know their season is over, but a kid from kid from the senior class who is starting to get a little bit more notice.
Well, he made his commitment to SMU in the past 7 days, so he decided where he wanted to play his college football, and that was, SMU has some good wide receiver commits, but made space for him in this class, and then a few days later, TCU comes calling with a scholarship offer for him as well, so it'll be very interesting to see if he's enticed now by a Power 5 program to give TCU a harder look. And, of course, TCU has a pretty good relationship into Byron Nelson, got Brandon Bowen a couple years back, so there is an established tie in there for TCU.
And he passes the measurables test. I mean,
Definitely.
6'3", 192. You know what? He looks the kind of receivers that SMU likes to have on their roster, those kind of long receivers. He certainly he fits that mold.
Definitely, and he's another guy who put up ridiculous stats this year. I mean, he didn't have the high-end production, didn't go over 1,000 yards, but 23 yards per catch, 8 touchdowns out on 28 receptions, so he's very productive, a guy who can stretch the field vertically. And he came to our next level athlete event, camp event back in the spring, and he was one of the best guys there. You could see that he moves really well for his size, and he has a great catch radius, which I think is something that's probably a bit undervalued as most people look at highlight tapes. He can get separation, and he has the long arms to keep defenders from getting in there to make a play.
So then let's talk about your schedule this week. I know that it is the playoffs, and you like to get around and see some of the top talents go up against some of the other top talents. Where are you heading this week?
Well, the game that I'm going to go to multiple games this week, but the game that I'm really excited to see is Midlothian Heritage versus Carthage. I haven't had the opportunity to see either team this year. Midlothian Heritage, of course, has the wide receiver tandem of Langston Anderson and Jay Wilkerson, and Carthage is, as always, loaded, has the younger brother of Keontae Ingram, who was on the front cover of our Rising magazine last year, playing at Texas, Kelvonte Dixon, and Tykeus Crawford, an offensive tackle who's already verbally committed to Baylor in the class of 2020. So a lot of talent on the field in that.
Man, it's so weird that you mentioned the Rising magazine last year. The
coincidence.
The 2018 recruiting edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football Rising, is at the printer right now. You had a huge hand in doing it. Thanks for your work.
Lots of work.
The check's in the mail. The check is not in the mail. But it's about time that we unveil the cover of the 2018 recruiting edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football. If you remember, last year was Keontae Ingram. The year before, it was Barron Browning. The year before that, it was
Jet
Duffy. So this is the 4th recruiting edition that we've done. And it is my distinct pleasure to announce the cover of the 2018 Texas Football Rising magazine is...
Oh my God, is it gonna be
Atascocita offensive lineman Kenyon Green is the cover boy for the 2018 Texas Football Rising. The Texas A&M commit is one of the very best offensive linemen in the nation. And you were talking about how he feels like an anchor of this really good Texas A&M class.
Well, first off, he's versatile up front.
Yeah.
He's a guy who's played tackle at Atascocita, and even back to his sophomore year, matched up with some of the top talents in the state. The battles with Kalavon Chason, who's at LSU now, are legendary, but has continued to develop. He could play any position, I think, up front, and that's really what makes him a special player and a big addition for Texas A&M. And is this the first Houston area prospect on the cover of
That
Rising?
would be correct. It's also the first time we've had an offensive lineman on any cover in a long, long time. I'd need to go back, but this is a guy that I think is so. Is a special kid and a guy who I think it can be an anchor for this A&M class, which I think is right now the story of recruiting in the state of Texas is Texas A&M's class.
Right.
So he is on the cover of the 2018 Texas Football Rising, our recruiting edition, which will hit newsstands soon. Subscribers, it is, I believe, going in the mail for you later this week. For Texas Football Insiders. You can order it. You can become a Dave Campbell's Texas Football Insider at TexasFootball.com. Retails for $9.95 off the newsstand, $19.95 for the entire year, which also gets you the summer edition. 400 prospects around the state profiled from the class of 2019, which are kids who are graduating this year.
Yep.
All the
Signed
way
in December to February.
All the way class of 2022, which are kids who are just finishing up their freshman year. And Greg Powers is, of course, lending his insight into all of these, who these kids are and why they are special. So we are really, really excited about the 2018 Texas Football Rising edition.
All 450 prospects who are featured in that magazine are bona fide next-level talents, whether they're going to a small school or a big school.
Yeah.
So it really talks well about the scope and depth of the talent that we have in this state.
Absolutely. And thanks for all your help. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
He's Greg Powers. Follow him on Twitter at GPowers79 and follow Next Level Athlete at Next Level D1. Thanks, Powers.